Um, you know that feeling when you're sitting in a crowded room, like maybe a high-stakes meeting or a bustling networking event, and someone asks a question?
Oh, yeah. The dreaded group question.
Right. And you have the absolute perfect answer. I mean, it is crystal clear in your head. You know it's the right answer. But instead of just saying it, you just sit there.
Your heart rate spikes.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
run the sentence through your brain for the 5th time to make sure there are like absolutely no flaws in the phrasing. And by the time you actually open your mouth to speak, well, the conversation has completely moved on.
Yeah, it's that paralyzing gap between having the knowledge internally and actually producing it externally. It's an incredibly common phenomenon, yet we rarely talk about the underlying cognitive mechanics of why it happens, or, more importantly, how to fix it.
Which is exactly what we're getting into today. So welcome to this deep dive into our source material. It's a really fascinating piece called Finding Your Voice, The Journey to English Confidence.
It's a great read.
It really is.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to completely decode the exact steps required to transition from being a silent observer, the person who understands absolutely everything going on around them, to a confident communicator who actively participates.
And while the source material specifically follows the journey of an English language learner, the psychological mechanisms at play here aren't limited to language acquisition. They apply to almost any scenario involving performance anxiety.
Totally. Because whether you're learning a new language or stepping into a highly technical new field with its own jargon, or honestly, if you're just trying to speak up more in your weekly team meetings, you've probably experienced this exact paralysis.
We all have, at some point.
Right. So to really understand this, we're going to look at the story of a guy named Ethan. Ethan is 31 years old, working as a graphic designer in a very modern, fast-paced international tech company.
And we need to establish Ethan's baseline right away because he is what you would call a fantastic passive learner.
Oh, absolutely.
His passive comprehension is remarkably high, which, interestingly enough, actually creates a very specific kind of psychological trap.
Yeah, because every morning he reads all his emails in English. He understands almost everything. He watches these complex hour-long design tutorials on YouTube without even needing subtitles.
Wow.
I know, right? He listens to industry podcasts on his commute. His input, his consumption of information is just constant, and it improves every single month. To him, it feels like he's mastering the skill.
But that illusion of competence is exactly what sets him up for a fall.
How so?
Well, passive consumption, reading, listening, watching it happens in a completely safe, controlled environment. There are no social stakes.
Right. Nobody's watching you listen to a podcast.
Exactly. Your brain is entirely in a receptive mode, pattern matching and absorbing. But the moment you flip the switch to active production, like speaking in real time, the entire neurological landscape changes. You're no longer just recognizing patterns. You have to generate them from scratch while simultaneously monitoring a social environment.
And we see that clash perfectly in Ethan's core struggle. Because despite all that incredible comprehension, whenever a colleague turns to him in the hallway and asks a simple question like, "Ethan, what do you think?" His system just shuts down.
The RAM gets overloaded.
Yeah, his heart beats faster. He starts obsessing over his grammar, his pronunciation. And his biggest fear is just that people will think he isn't smart enough for the job. So he gives these really polite, invisible responses like, "I agree," or "That's a good idea."
Basically hiding in plain sight.
Exactly.
He's employing a classic avoidance strategy to minimize his surface area for mistakes, basically. If you don't say anything of substance, no one can critique your syntax or your logic.
But all of this comes to a head during a pivotal narrative event in the source material. So it's a Monday morning, and there's a massive product launch meeting.
The worst possible scenario for someone hiding.
Literally. This isn't just a casual water cooler chat. The department head has invited everyone to share ideas to make the new product interface easier to use. Now, Ethan is prepared.
He's got ideas.
Brilliant ones. He spent the weekend thinking about a specific design tweak. He sketched it out in his notebook. He even stood in his living room and practiced explaining it out loud to an empty room. He knows exactly what he wants to say.
He's done the preparatory work. In theory, all the data is loaded into his brain and ready to be deployed.
Right. But then the meeting starts. The manager asks for suggestions. Ethan quietly raises his hand.
Oh, boy.
The room goes quiet. All 12 faces turn to look at him, and his mind just instantly goes blank. He literally says out loud, "I think maybe we can," and then he just stops. He forgets the entire next sentence. Someone else awkwardly jumps in with a different idea to save the silence. The conversation moves on, and Ethan stays completely silent for the rest of the hour.
See, that physical sensation of the mind going blank isn't a metaphor. It's a literal physiological stress response.
Okay, let's unpack this, because reading about Ethan freezing up made me think of what happens to my computer when it crashes.
How do you mean?
Well, it's like your brain is a computer's RAM, right? The short-term memory that handles active tasks.
Yeah.
When you're just sitting there listening, the RAM is barely being used. But the second everyone looks at you, you suddenly open 50 heavy applications at once.
Yes.
You're running the Translate Vocabulary app, the Check Verb Tense app, the Monitor the Boss's Facial Expression app, and the, Don't Sound Stupid app. The RAM completely maxes out, and the whole operating system just freezes. You get the mental equivalent of the spinning beach ball of death.
What's fascinating here is how accurately that aligns with the psychology of cognitive load and performance anxiety.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Your working memory has a very finite capacity. When you flood it with social threat detection, which is what the brain is doing when it worries about judgment, there's literally no processing power left to retrieve vocabulary or structure a sentence.
It's all tied up worrying.
Exactly. Ethan is operating under a deeply flawed assumption about what communication actually is. He's treating every single time he opens his mouth as a high-stakes performance. He believes he's stepping onto a stage, and his colleagues are judges holding up scorecards for his grammar and his pronunciation.
When in reality, those colleagues aren't judging his syntax at all. They just want a solution to the UI problem. They want his ideas.
Precisely. The audience in a meeting isn't looking for a flawless linguistic performance. They're looking for an exchange of value. But because Ethan views it as a performance, the cost of making a mistake feels catastrophic to his ego.
Right, so he prefers the safety of silence over the perceived humiliation of a minor stumble.
Exactly.
And Ethan actually realizes this. On the way home from that disastrous meeting, he's crushed. But he writes something in his journal that serves as the core insight for this entire deep dive. He writes, "Today, I didn't fail because I didn't know English. I failed because I didn't believe my voice was valuable."
That is a profound diagnostic shift. He's correctly identifying that the barrier is no longer linguistic.
Yeah, more flashcards won't fix a RAM issue.
Right. The barrier is entirely psychological.
So how do you actually escape that trap? Because just logically knowing that you're treating communication like a performance doesn't magically make the biological anxiety go away.
Unfortunately not.
Like, if you're listening to this and you've ever felt your face get hot when your boss calls on you on a Zoom call, you can't just think your way out of a physiological response. You have to fundamentally rewire your approach. And that brings us to Ethan's bookstore epiphany.
A crucial turning point in the material. And notice where he directs his energy next.
Yeah, so the following Saturday, he goes to his favorite bookstore. But instead of buying another advanced grammar workbook to fix his perceived mistakes, he walks over to the communication and psychology section.
A huge step.
Huge. He picks up classic books by Dale Carnegie, specifically How to Win Friends and Influence People and The Quick and Easy Way to Effective Speaking. And this triggers a massive mindset shift.
What does he find?
He reads that people actually enjoy talking to those who listen sincerely, who ask thoughtful questions, and who show genuine interest. It hits him that confident communication isn't about delivering a TED Talk every time you speak. It's entirely about helping others feel heard. It's about connection.
That shift from perfection to connection is the master key to lowering the cognitive load we talked about earlier.
Wait, so the secret to speaking better yourself is to actually focus your attention on the other person. That seems totally counterintuitive when you are the one desperately trying to practice your own language skills.
It sounds counterintuitive, I know, but it's a highly effective psychological hack to bypass the ego.
How does that work?
Well, when you're hyper-focused on your own sentences, your brain is entirely internally focused. You're monitoring yourself. In psychology, this creates the spotlight effect, the cognitive bias, where you genuinely believe everyone is analyzing your every move with high scrutiny.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
Right. But by actively shifting your focus outward to the other person, asking yourself, do they feel understood? Am I connecting with what they just said? You remove that harsh internal spotlight from your own mistakes.
So you're basically tricking your threat detection system into powering down.
Exactly. You're closing those heavy background applications. If the goal is no longer deliver a flawless sentence, but instead make a connection with this human being, then suddenly a grammatical error or a stutter doesn't matter.
Because a mistake doesn't ruin a connection.
No, in fact, vulnerability and slight imperfections often enhance human connection. It makes you relatable. So by focusing outward, the pressure to be perfect dissipates, freeing up your working memory so you can actually just speak.
That makes so much sense. But as Carnegie points out in those books, a mindset shift isn't enough on its own. He writes, "Courage grows through action." Ethan realizes he can't just meditate his way out of this fear. He has to literally rewire his daily routine to put this new connection over perfection theory to the test.
Right, the abstract concept has to be operationalized into concrete, low-stakes behaviors. You have to prove to your nervous system that speaking is safe.
So Ethan builds a toolkit of specific micro habits, and the progression here is just fascinating. He starts by just trying to break the seal of silence every single day.
Okay.
He implements a 10-minute morning routine. Before he checks his phone or reads an email, he spends 10 minutes speaking out loud in his living room on simple everyday topics like his favorite season, what he wants to eat for dinner, his goals for the week.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, he speaks slowly, he pauses, he repeats words, but he forces himself not to stop. He always ends with this spoken affirmation, "Today I will communicate with confidence."
Starting the day this way is crucial. Neurologically, he's establishing a baseline. By speaking without an audience, he's proving to his brain that his voice works in this target language without triggering any social threat response. He's basically warming up the engine in a controlled environment.
But he quickly realizes that just talking to himself about dinner doesn't really prep him for holding someone's attention in a real conversation.
Sure.
So he evolves the practice. He grabs a book of short stories, and instead of reading silently, he reads aloud to practice the rhythm of the characters. Then he closes the book and forces himself to summarize the plot from memory, as if he's explaining it to a friend.
This is where we see the transition from passive recognition to active recall.
Yeah.
When you read silently, you're using existing neural pathways. It feels easy because the words are already provided. But summarizing a story from memory forces the brain to forge new pathways. It mimics the demands of impromptu speaking, training him to prioritize meaning-making over rote memorization. He's learning how to convey an idea even if he forgets the perfect vocabulary word.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Summarizing a story alone is great, but Ethan knows that in a dynamic corporate meeting, you can't just launch into a monologue. You have to interject.
Right, you need to jump in naturally.
Exactly. You have to buy your brain time when the pressure is on. So he starts developing what he calls conversational anchors. Instead of memorizing complex, impressive jargon to sound smart, he memorizes highly functional transition phrases.
Oh, like what?
Things like, "I'd like to add something to that," or "From my perspective, we should consider," or even just, "Could you clarify that last point?"
This is a tremendous strategy known in neurolinguistics as chunking.
I love looking at those conversational anchors like pre-built scaffolding. I mean, if you're in a high-pressure meeting and you have to construct the entire house, the foundation, the walls, the roof, all at once while everyone is staring at you, you're going to collapse under the cognitive load.
Absolutely.
But if you have pre-built scaffolding already in place, those automatic phrases like, "I'd like to add something," you don't have to build them on the spot. You just snap them together. It gives your brain a crucial 3-second head start to figure out what the actual substance of the sentence is going to be.
If we connect this to the bigger picture by memorizing these functional chunks of language, he's storing them in the automatic rhythmic parts of the brain. When we say, "How are you?" we don't think of 3 separate words. We think of one chunk of meaning.
Right.
That's what Ethan is doing with his scaffolding. He bypasses the analytical, translating part of the brain that causes hesitation. He doesn't have to think to say, "From my perspective." It just rolls out, creating momentum. And in public speaking, momentum is the ultimate enemy of anxiety.
Wow. Momentum is the enemy of anxiety. That's a great way to put it. And to keep that momentum going, Ethan has to tackle the final boss of language paralysis, the internal translation loop.
Oh, the dreaded translation loop.
Yes. He realizes that listening to podcasts on his commute is just too passive. So he starts pausing his industry podcasts every few minutes and forces himself to answer questions out loud, like, "What did I just learn?" or "Do I agree with this host?" He forces his brain to stop translating from his native language and start reacting directly in the target language.
He's effectively simulating the unpredictability of a real conversation. You don't get a script in a meeting. You have to generate original thoughts on the fly. By pausing and reacting, he's training his working memory to handle real-time processing without crashing.
But practicing alone in your apartment or your car is still a controlled environment. You have your scaffolding, you have your momentum, but the ultimate test of this system is taking it out into the messy, unpredictable, real world.
Yeah, the garage door has to open and you have to take the car out on the highway.
Because theoretical confidence doesn't survive contact with reality unless it's validated by experience.
Completely agree.
So Ethan finally tests this one Saturday. He's at a coffee shop, and a tourist approaches him, holding a map, asking for directions to the local art museum. Now, the old Ethan, the guy terrified of a grammar mistake, would have just pointed at the map, nodded, and walked away.
Right, avoiding the interaction entirely.
But this time, Ethan decides to use his voice. He gives the directions out loud, using his scaffolding. It's a 60-second interaction. He tells them to walk straight for 10 minutes and turn left. The tourist thanks him, compliments his clear English, and they part ways.
It's a brief exchange, but for Ethan's nervous system, the psychological ROI on that single minute is astronomical.
Why is that? Why does a 60-second exchange about a left turn outweigh 50 hours of reading a textbook?
Because it provides undeniable proof of utility. A textbook provides theoretical knowledge, but that brief interaction proved to his brain that his voice actually achieved a tangible, real-world outcome. He helped another human being navigate a foreign city.
It wasn't a test.
No, the language wasn't a performance to be graded. It was a practical tool for connection and assistance. It completely validates the Dale Carnegie shift he made back in the bookstore. His voice has value because it can help people.
And that tiny spark of validation propels him to take a massive leap. A month later, Ethan joins an in-person international conversation club in his city.
Wow, good for him.
I know. He walks into a room full of learners from all over the world. Some are highly fluent, some are total beginners. The leader of the club opens the session by explicitly stating, "This is a place for progress, not perfection."
Setting that ground rule verbally is incredibly powerful. It instantly diffuses the spotlight effect for everyone in the room by explicitly removing the threat of judgment. It creates a psychologically safe harbor.
And it's in this safe harbor that Ethan experiences a truly full-circle moment. He gets paired up with a woman named Maria, and Maria is visibly terrified.
Oh, she's where she used to be.
Gaggling. She confesses to Ethan that she's absolutely paralyzed by the fear that people are going to laugh at her accent or her mistakes. And Ethan, the guy who literally froze in front of his entire department just a few months ago, looks at her and smiles. He says, "I used to think the exact same thing, but people don't laugh, they just want to help." And you can see Maria instantly relax.
The character arc there is remarkable, but there's also a very specific psychological mechanism at work in that exchange.
So what does this all mean? Is there a hidden benefit here? Because Ethan went from being the paralyzed employee who desperately needed someone to rescue him in that meeting to suddenly being the mentor offering reassurance. Is reassuring someone else actually a selfishly brilliant way to cement your own confidence?
This raises an important question about how we internalize our own identity. Yes, it's incredibly effective. In psychology, there's a concept known as the protege effect, where teaching or guiding someone else actually reinforces your own mastery of a subject.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it goes deeper than that. This taps into self-perception theory, which suggests that we develop our attitudes by observing our own behavior.
Wait, so by acting like a confident mentor, he starts believing he is one.
Exactly. By verbally assuring Maria that the world is a helpful place, not a hostile judging panel, he's cementing that reality in his own subconscious. He's talking to his own past self.
That is wild.
Helping Maria finally shatters his own lingering imposter syndrome. He proves to his own brain that he has completely crossed the bridge from a silent, fearful observer to a confident, supportive communicator.
He's no longer the guy hiding the sports car in the garage. He's tossing the keys to someone else and teaching them how to drive. It's a perfect encapsulation of the journey.
It really is.
So let's bring all of these threads together. The journey from being someone who knows the perfect answer in their head to someone who speaks it out loud with ease is not a journey of acquiring more data. It's not achieved by memorizing another 100 vocabulary words or mastering the perfect accent.
Right, the data is already loaded in the RAM. The shift required is entirely behavioral and psychological.
It's achieved by fundamentally shifting the goalpost. If you're listening to this and you struggle with speaking up, you have to stop viewing communication as a high-stakes performance where perfection is demanded. Start viewing it as a messy, highly practical tool for human connection.
Connection over perfection.
Yes. And you build the courage to make that connection through deliberate action. You build prefabricated conversational scaffolding so you don't have to think on your feet as much. You practice daily micro habits that train your active recall. And you intentionally put yourself in low-stakes, real-world situations where you can prove to your nervous system that your voice actually works and that the world isn't out to get you.
And you have to embrace the reality that a mistake isn't a failure or an indictment of your intelligence. It's just a natural, expected byproduct of active participation.
So as you go into your week, whether you're prepping for a massive board meeting, trying to network at an industry event, or even just practicing a new language with a barista, remember Ethan's story. Remember that your working memory can only handle so much, so take the pressure off.
Definitely.
Your voice, your unique perspective, and the ideas you have sitting in your head are incredibly valuable. But they don't do anyone any good if they stay locked inside. Courage isn't some magical innate trait that extroverts are just born with. It's a muscle that you grow entirely through action.
The psychological tools and the micro habits are entirely within your control. You just have to make the choice to deploy them.
Which leaves me with one final thought I want you to mull over today. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about how finding your voice helps you connect with others, how it lowers your anxiety, how it builds your professional confidence. But what if we flip the script completely?
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about that meeting where you had the perfect solution but stayed quiet. What if your silence isn't just a shield protecting you from a little bit of temporary embarrassment? What if your silence is actually depriving someone else in the room of the exact idea they desperately need to hear today?
Wow. If you look at it that way, speaking up isn't just a personal goal. It becomes a responsibility to the people around you. That changes the stakes entirely.
It really does. Because maybe finding the courage to speak up isn't just about protecting your own ego. Maybe it's about giving them the missing piece of the puzzle. Keep that in mind the next time you feel the urge to just nod, blend into the background, and say, I agree. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanics of finding your voice. We'll get you next time.
Have you ever had a truly brilliant idea, something that just clicked perfectly in your mind, but then the second you opened your mouth to explain it, the words just tumbled out as a complete jumbled mess?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is a universally humbling experience.
Right.
And one that, completely bypasses your level of intelligence or your expertise.
Yeah, exactly. You finish talking, you look at the blank faces staring back at you, and you just think to yourself, wow, that sounded way, way better in my head.
Oh, I have been there so many times. We all have.
So if you have ever felt that sting of a derailed train of thought, you are in exactly the right place. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this one.
Today, we are exploring the true art of clear communication, and we're doing it through an incredibly relatable story from our source material about a guy named Daniel.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case study.
Yeah.
Because it strips away all the superficial advice we usually hear about public speaking and gets right to the cognitive mechanics of how humans actually process information.
Exactly. The mission for today's deep dive is to completely debunk a massive, pervasive myth. And that myth is the idea that being a great persuasive communicator requires you to have this dictionary-sized vocabulary or, the ability to speak at some rapid-fire speed.
Right, which is just false. And we should establish right at the start that while Daniel's story centers around communicating in a workplace where English is the main language, this exact same breakdown happens to native speakers every single day.
Oh, 100%.
We all suffer from this. We get entirely caught up in trying to sound impressive. We use jargon, we talk fast, we layer on all this complexity.
Yeah, trying to sound smart.
Right.
Yeah.
But the ultimate aha moment we're going to uncover today is that the absolute best communicators do not rely on big, complicated words. They simply possess the underlying architecture to make complicated ideas simple.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's introduce Daniel. Our sources describe him as a 32-year-old employee at this international tech company. He is intelligent, he's highly creative, and he's a very hardworking guy. Because his company is international, he is collaborating with colleagues from all over the world, and English is the shared language of the office.
And he actually really enjoys what he does, which I think makes his struggle even more poignant.
Yeah, it really does.
He is a natural problem solver. He thrives on finding those out-of-the-box solutions to complex issues.
He's the exact guy you want on your team, basically. He comes up with these excellent, highly creative solutions for his company's projects. He literally writes them down in his notebook, organizes them carefully in his own mind, and he sits in the conference room just waiting for the perfect moment.
Right, he's totally prepared.
But here's the problem. The moment his manager turns to him and says, "Daniel, what do you think?" Total panic sets in.
It triggers a complete physiological response. We're talking about the fight or flight mechanism taking over in the middle of a corporate meeting.
Wow, just from being called on.
Yeah, when that adrenaline spikes, the executive function of the brain, the part responsible for logic and ordering thoughts, it temporarily short-circuits.
That makes so much sense. So his heart starts racing. All those perfectly organized thoughts suddenly crowd together at the exit door of his mind. He starts speaking, but then he second guesses himself.
Yep, the classic pivot.
He changes direction mid-sentence. He starts piling on way too many tiny details, trying to cover every possible angle, and completely loses his own main point.
And the result is brutal.
It is. He finishes talking, and the room is just dead silent. Nobody has any idea what his proposal actually was.
And the tragedy here is that the room isn't silent because his idea was bad. It's silent because they simply could not follow the map he was drawing for them. He overloaded their working memory capacity.
I was thinking about this, and it feels exactly like going to a restaurant that hands you a 100-page menu with tiny font.
Oh, the worst.
Right. When I see that, I just get completely overwhelmed. My brain shuts down, and I end up ordering a plain salad or just defaulting to a glass of water because I can't process the sheer volume of options.
That is exactly what happens in the brain. Cognitive overload.
But let me push back a little here, or at least play devil's advocate. We are talking about a professional, technical setting. Shouldn't more detail mean a better, more thorough explanation?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah, doesn't flooding the room with detail prove that you've done your homework and that you actually know what you're talking about?
It is incredibly common to think that way, largely because of how we are conditioned in school. We assume that volume equals competence.
Right, like writing a longer essay gets a better grade.
Exactly. But cognitively, that is a massive trap. The human brain can only hold a very limited amount of new, unstructured information at once. When you dump data on people, you aren't proving your intelligence.
You're just confusing them.
You are ruining the signal-to-noise ratio. When Daniel replays these terrible meetings in his head, he falsely diagnoses the issue. He thinks, oh, I need better English vocabulary, or I spoke too slowly, I need to be faster.
He thinks his mental database isn't big enough.
Yes.
He's diagnosing the completely wrong disease. He thinks he needs more software, but his hardware is crashing.
That is a great way to put it. His hardware is completely crashing. And the turning point in the source material happens when his manager pulls him aside and gives him some tough but incredibly valuable feedback.
What did she say?
She tells him point blank, your ideas are excellent. The content of your mind is not the problem. Gut, you are trying to explain every single facet of the idea at exactly the same time.
Which leads to Daniel's core realization. His problem is not his vocabulary. His problem is his structure.
Right.
He's dumping 1,000 puzzle pieces on the conference table and expecting his team to magically see the final picture instead of just showing them the picture on the box first.
Without a structure for his thoughts, the vocabulary is practically useless. It doesn't matter if you have $1 million vocabulary if the listener's brain has already shut down from cognitive overload.
Okay, so identifying a problem is one thing, right? That's the easy part. Acknowledging you have bad structure takes 10 seconds.
Sure.
But fixing it, rebuilding your entire mental architecture when you realize you've been communicating wrong your whole life, that takes actual work. So once Daniel has this epiphany, how does he actually fix the wiring?
Well, he realizes he needs to study the mechanics of communication, not just the English language.
Makes sense.
The source material outlines how he dives into a research phase, looking for the underlying patterns of people who do this well.
Right, so he goes straight to the bookstore, and his first major discovery is a book called Talk Like TED by Carmine Gallo.
A great book.
Yeah, it analyzes the absolute best speakers in the world, the people who give viral TED Talks, and guess what? They aren't up there using words no one has ever heard of.
Not at all.
The greatest speakers consistently rely on a few very specific structural guardrails. They share one clear idea, not 5, not 10, one.
Just one.
They tell stories, they use very simple everyday examples, they pause naturally, and they speak slowly enough for people to actually digest the information.
What's fascinating here is the psychology behind why those specific traits work. every single one of those habits requires immense restraint.
Restraint.
Yeah, it requires the speaker to hold back.
Yeah.
It fights against the curse of knowledge, which is that cognitive bias where you assume the person listening has the same background understanding that you do.
Oh, I see. And because you assume they know what you know, you skip the basics and jump straight into the complex weeds.
Exactly. Or rather, you try to give them the weeds, the roots, and the soil all at once. And this connects beautifully to the second foundational book Daniel picks up during his research, Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath.
Oh, an absolute classic.
It is. And the core lesson Daniel extracts from it is vital for you listening to this right now to internalize for your own professional life. The human brain is a filtering machine.
Meaning it just throws most things away.
It discards almost everything it hears. People only remember ideas that are simple, concrete, and easy to understand. That is the biological formula for an idea to stick.
Wow.
Clarity will always be more powerful than complexity.
You know, realizing that actually relieves so much pressure. You do not have to sound artificially impressive or use boardroom jargon. You just have to be clear.
Exactly.
But theory is great. Practice is where the magic happens. Reading a book about a bicycle doesn't mean you can ride one. So how does Daniel translate these big psychological concepts into a Tuesday morning routine?
Well, he builds a very specific, actionable toolkit for himself. He doesn't just try to, be better in his next meeting. He essentially creates a customized cognitive training regimen to rewire his automatic habits.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the sources outline a rigorous, three-pronged strategy that Daniel uses. Let's walk through how he completely changed his daily habits.
Let's do it.
The first piece of his strategy is what I'd call a summarization constraint. Daniel starts reading a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners. Now, for a guy working at an international tech firm, the reading level is way below his capability.
Right, he's reading beginner stuff.
But the magic isn't in the reading, it's in what happens after. He finishes a chapter, literally closes the book so he can't look at it, and forces himself to summarize the entire narrative aloud using only 3 parts: a beginning, a middle, and an ending.
And the source notes that at first, this constraint is agonizing for him.
Really? Just summarizing a beginner story.
Yeah. His brain desperately wants to include every single minor detail, every subplot, every character description. But he has to force himself to stop and remember his new mantra. Keep it simple.
It's like pruning a tree so the main branches can actually grow.
That's a perfect way to look at it. By forcing himself to find just a beginning, middle, and end, Daniel was actively training his brain's executive function to filter out noise.
Building a new habit.
He was building a mental schema. When you can consistently identify the core spine of a simple story, you can start identifying the core spine of a complex business proposal.
Okay, but having a summary in your head is different from getting it out of your mouth smoothly in real time, especially when the adrenaline hits.
Right, the execution part.
So that brings us to the second part of his strategy: mastering structural vocabulary. He studies a book called English Vocabulary in Use. But again, he completely ignores random, obscure words. He focuses entirely on phrases that organize ideas.
This acts as the cognitive scaffolding for his thoughts.
Yes. Phrases like, I believe the main reason is, for example, and in conclusion. He practices these transition phrases so relentlessly that they become automatic muscle memory.
He's hardwiring them.
He never has to panic about how to start a sentence again because he already has these structural anchors ready to deploy.
Let's look at why scaffolding is so important for working memory. When you are nervous, the hardest part is just getting the first few words out.
Oh, for sure. The blank slate is terrifying.
Right. The cognitive burden of trying to find the right word and form the idea at the exact same time is what causes the brain to freeze.
That makes so much sense.
If you have those structural phrases preloaded and automatic, you offload that burden. It gives your brain a microsecond to calm down and retrieve the actual idea you want to share because the syntax is already taken care of itself.
Which brings us to the third piece of his strategy, which might be the most powerful change he made: active listening synthesis.
This one is huge.
Daniel used to listen to audio lessons specifically, a program called Effortless English, and he would just repeat the sentences exactly as he heard them, pure parroting.
Which is very common.
Right. But he changes the game. Now, he listens, he hits pause on the audio, and he asks himself out loud, what was the main idea? And then he forces himself to explain that main idea aloud in just 1 to 3 sentences.
He is moving from passive consumption to active synthesis.
What's the difference cognitively?
Passive consumption just washes over the brain. Active synthesis forces the brain to build neural pathways. You're actually doing the heavy lifting of processing.
Think about your own media diet for a second. How often do you consume a podcast, read a long article, or sit through a 40-minute meeting and never actually stop afterward to see if you can summarize the main point in a single sentence?
Probably rarely.
We consume huge amounts of information every single day, but we rarely force ourselves to synthesize it.
It is a profound shift in behavior. And what really cements Daniel's progress is that he doesn't leave these practices isolated in his study room.
He takes it to the streets.
He takes this active synthesis out into the real world. The source material describes him explaining his breakfast recipe out loud using that clear structure.
I love that.
He summarizes movie plots for his friends. He goes for walks and literally asks himself out loud, "What did I learn today?" and forces a structured answer.
It's all about repetition.
This proves the central thesis of our deep dive. Good communication isn't about saying more. It is entirely about saying the most important thing first.
Practice makes permanent. But all this internal practice, all this summarizing and talking to himself on walks, it all gets put into sharp perspective by this really beautiful, simple lesson he gets from his grandmother.
It's a wonderful metaphor that ties all this cognitive theory into something highly visual.
Let me set the scene from the source material. Daniel goes to visit his grandmother, and she asks him how his communication is progressing at work.
Because she knew he was struggling.
Right. And he admits that while he feels more confident in his structure, he still struggles with the temptation to over-explain his ideas to make sure people, quote-unquote, really get it.
That urge to over-explain is so hard to shake.
So his grandmother doesn't give him a lecture. She gives him a visual demonstration. She brings out 2 clear glasses of water. One glass is filled with perfectly clean, clear water, but into the other glass she drops a spoonful of soil from the garden and stirs it around.
And the water instantly becomes murky, cloudy, and dark.
Exactly. And then she asks him the most obvious yet brilliant question. She asks, which glass would you rather drink from?
And of course, Daniel chooses the clear one.
Naturally, because he can see exactly what is in it.
Her response to that should frankly be framed in every corporate boardroom. She says, "Our ideas are the same. When our thoughts are clear, people understand us. When we try to say everything at once, our message becomes cloudy."
That is so good.
If we apply that to the information overload we all face today, it perfectly explains why we tune out during meetings. The soil in that water isn't necessarily bad information.
Right. It might be true data.
Yes, it's the tangent information. It's the background history, the secondary metrics, the nice-to-knows. But when you dump all that soil in at once, the listener can't drink the water. You've made the core idea completely unpalatable.
We are constantly drowning our coworkers in cloudy water. We hand them these murky, overstuffed presentations because we want to prove we did the research, and we wonder why they don't want to drink it.
Exactly. We confuse being comprehensive with being clear.
And this grandmotherly wisdom leads us right into the climax of Daniel's story, the ultimate test. A few months into his new regimen, Daniel is asked to present a brand new, highly complex project at work.
This is the high-stakes environment where his old fight-or-flight response used to trigger.
The highest stakes. And the old Daniel, the one from Chapter 1, would have been absolutely terrified. He would have brought a slide deck with 50 slides, 100 bullet points, and he would have talked at 1,000,000 miles an hour to get through it all before anyone could interrupt him.
Just dumping all the soil into the glass.
Exactly. But this time, he prepares completely differently. He leans on his constraint training. He writes down only 3 main ideas. Just 3.
Wow.
And for each idea, he allows himself exactly 1 example. Nothing more.
The discipline that takes, especially when you are deeply embedded in a project and know all the nuances, is incredible. It is so hard to leave the soil out of the glass.
It really is. So he gets up to the front of the conference room, and instead of his heart racing and the panic setting in, he relies on his scaffolding. He takes a slow breath. He actually smiles.
A huge difference already.
And he starts by deploying his structural vocabulary. Today, I'd like to share 3 ways we can improve our customer service. He speaks slowly. He consciously pauses between his points to let the audience's working memory catch up.
Giving them time to process.
He uses simple, relatable examples. And the result?
His colleagues actually understand him. They aren't overwhelmed.
When he finishes, the room isn't dead silent anymore. People are engaged, they are leaning in, asking thoughtful questions about the application of his ideas, not asking him to repeat himself.
Because they can finally follow the map.
His manager tells him it was an excellent, easy-to-follow presentation. For the very first time in his career, Daniel realizes his ideas have truly been heard.
And you know you have truly mastered a new skill when you reach the point where you can systematize it and teach it to someone else.
Passing the torch.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the impact of Daniel's transformation doesn't stop with him. The younger employees at his tech company start noticing this shift.
They see the change.
They see this guy who communicates so effectively, who never seems flustered, and they start pulling him aside to ask for advice. They say, "How do you explain such complex technical things so clearly?"
I love that he laughs and tells him he used to do the exact opposite. He doesn't pretend he was born with this gift.
He's honest about the struggle.
He distills his entire journey, all those books, all that practice, into 4 incredibly simple golden rules. And these are rules that you, the listener, can steal right now, today, for your next conversation.
Let's lay them out. Rule number 1, one idea at a time. Do not force your audience to juggle.
Keep it to 1.
Rule number 2, use simple words. Never use a $10 word when a $1 word does the job better.
Love that.
Rule number 3, give examples. Anchor your abstract thoughts to concrete reality. And rule number 4, pause before speaking. Give your own brain a moment to build the scaffolding.
Those 4 rules could replace 100 expensive corporate communication seminars. So what does this all mean? When we look back at the very beginning of Daniel's journey, he had a note in his journal that just said, "I wish people understood my ideas."
Which is almost heartbreaking.
It is, because it's a feeling of utter isolation. But here is the beautiful truth revealed in the source material. The people around Daniel didn't suddenly become smarter. His English vocabulary didn't magically multiply overnight.
The raw material of his intelligence was exactly the same. The only thing that changed was the structure of delivery.
What changed was simply how he organized his thoughts before they ever left his mouth. Clarity is what finally gave his brilliance the chance to shine.
Which brings us to a challenge for our listener.
We are not just going to leave you with a nice story about Daniel. We want you to put this deep dive into practice today.
Try it yourself.
Your challenge is this. Pick one simple topic. It doesn't have to be a major work presentation. It could be your favorite book, what you actually did at your job today, what you have planned for the weekend, or even just why you love your favorite food.
Keep it low stakes.
Take that topic and explain it to someone using this exact 3-step structure from our source material.
First, state your main idea clearly. Second, give one reason why it matters or why you believe it. And third, share one single concrete example.
That's it.
Main idea, reason, example.
It sounds almost too easy, but when you actually try it, you realize how much discipline it takes to stay within those lines and not dump a bunch of muddy soil into the glass.
Because confident communication is, at its core, just a byproduct of organized thinking.
Wow. Yeah.
The clarity has to happen in your mind before it can ever happen in the room. Before you speak, you have to ask yourself, what is my main idea? Why is it important? And can I give one simple example?
And if you can't?
If you can't answer those 3 questions yourself, you are simply not ready to explain it to someone else.
That is such a crucial cognitive filter to put your thoughts through.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder as you go about the rest of your day. Think about the last time someone strongly disagreed with a brilliant idea you had, whether that was a pitch at work or even just a plan you had at home.
Okay.
What if they weren't actually rejecting your idea at all? What if they just couldn't see the brilliance of it because the water you handed them was too cloudy?
Wow. That completely changes how you look at almost every argument or miscommunication, doesn't it?
It really does.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Remember, the greatest communicators in the world are not the ones with the heaviest dictionaries. They are the ones who put in the work to make their brilliance accessible to absolutely everyone.
Beautifully said.
So, next time you feel those words jumbling up, take a breath, find your structure, and clear the water. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
So think about this for a second. When was the last time you sat quietly for just like 5 minutes?
Oh, wow. Just 5 minutes.
Yeah, but I mean really quietly, not waiting in line at the grocery store while staring at a screen.
Right.
I mean, absolutely no phone, no television, no music in the background, no smartwatch, buzzing your wrist with a bunch of notifications. Just you, completely alone with your own thoughts.
For most of us, answering that honestly is, it's a little bit uncomfortable, honestly,
Yeah.
because in our current era of just constant information overload, having a wandering, anxious mind is not a personal failing. It is, well, it's basically the default setting of modern life.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's surprisingly difficult to find that quiet. But that question actually sets the foundation for today's deep dive.
It does.
We're exploring some really fascinating excerpts today from the Easy English podcast, specifically focusing on this concept they call the quiet path to English fluency and how to calm your mind.
Yeah, and the mission today is to unpack what is a seriously counterintuitive idea.
Super counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Because we usually assume that mastering a complex new skill, like learning a language, requires just furiously cramming in more and more information.
We treat it as an endurance test.
Exactly. But the materials we're looking at today suggest that slowing down and intentionally calming the mind is actually like the ultimate life hack for learning.
Which is such a vital paradigm shift, I think. What we're really examining today is the idea that learning shouldn't be about adding pressure to a system that's already overloaded.
Right.
It has to be about establishing a baseline of peace first, because without that baseline, the cognitive mechanics of learning, they simply break down.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, because we aren't just talking about abstract wellness advice today. We have a very specific, actionable case study to ground this in.
Right, Sophia.
Yeah. So we're introduced to a 29-year-old full-time office worker named Sophia, and her daily grind is just intense.
Oh, it sounds exhausting.
It really does. She spends her entire day answering emails, sitting through these back-to-back meetings, and solving relentless problems. So by the time she gets home, she is completely wiped out.
Which is totally understandable.
Right. Yet she subjects herself to this grueling evening routine of English books, vocabulary drills, videos, and, audio lessons.
She's doing everything conventionally right to become a confident speaker.
But the friction lies in the fact that her greatest hurdle isn't actually English grammar or pronunciation.
No.
Her hurdle is her internal state. She genuinely enjoys learning, but when she sits down with her books, her mind is simply not in the room.
She's stressing over unfinished tasks or, replaying some minor mistakes she made during a morning meeting.
She reads the exact same paragraph 3 times and absorbs absolutely nothing.
We've all been there.
Trying to learn while you are that stressed is, well, it's like having 50 tabs open on your web browser, and you're just sitting there wondering why the one video you actually want to watch keeps buffering.
Yeah.
The processor is just maxed out. There is literally no working memory left for the new information.
That analogy hits the nail on the head because cognitive bandwidth is entirely finite. We tend to treat our brains like these infinite storage drives, assuming we can just keep saving new files regardless of how many background programs are running.
And you just can't.
No, you can't. When your system is crashing like that, forcing a reboot often leads to, well, really counterproductive behaviors.
Which brings us to the dreaded doom scroll.
Ah, yes. The doom scroll.
Sophia decides she needs to relax, so she picks up her phone and she tells herself, she'll just check social media for 5 minutes.
And we know how that goes.
It turns into an hour of mindless scrolling. And we don't need to rehash the psychological trap of looking at other people's highlight reels, right? We all know that makes us feel terrible.
Yeah, definitely.
But what I want to know is the neurological cost of doing this right after trying to study.
Well, the neurological cost is catastrophic for learning. I mean, when you study a language, you're trying to form delicate new neural connections.
Right.
To consolidate those short-term memories into long-term storage, your brain relies really heavily on a region called the hippocampus.
Okay.
But when you doom scroll, you are subjecting your brain to this massive roller coaster of dopamine spikes, followed immediately by crashes.
Oh, wow.
And if you mix in the anxiety of comparing your life to others, your body starts releasing cortisol.
The stress hormone.
Exactly, the primary stress hormone. And cortisol physically inhibits the hippocampus.
Wait, physically inhibits it?
Yes. You are essentially flooding the exact part of the brain you need for memory retention with a chemical that literally blocks it from working.
So she's spending 2 hours studying and then accidentally washing all that new vocabulary away with the chemical flood of stress before she even goes to sleep.
Exactly.
And her body might eventually sleep, but her mind never rests, meaning she wakes up with the cognitive load of yesterday and anxiety of tomorrow.
Precisely. It is virtually impossible to encode new language skills or, any complex memories when you're operating in a persistent state of fight or flight.
The brain just prioritizes survival over vocabulary retention.
It has to, yeah.
But this dynamic finally breaks for her on a Saturday morning.
Yes, the turning point.
Right. Sophia wakes up exhausted, realizes her mind has been running on a treadmill all night, and she makes this tiny but radical choice.
Which I love.
Instead of reaching for the phone on the nightstand, she gets up and opens her window. She lets the fresh morning air in, she listens to the birds, and she takes 5 slow, deep breaths.
Just 5 breaths.
It is her first real moment of quiet in weeks.
What's fascinating here is the immediate physiological shift that occurs. Replacing a digital screen with the physical, sensory act of opening a window instantly changes her mental state.
But how does something so simple override that whole stress cycle you were just talking about?
It all comes down to the nervous system. You see, screens are engineered to keep us in a state of high alert, engaging the sympathetic nervous system.
The fight or flight response.
Right. But by redirecting her attention to physical sensory input, the feeling of the cold air, the sound of the birds, she forces her brain to process the present moment.
Okay, that makes sense.
And those 5 deep, deliberate breaths act as a mechanical signal to the vagus nerve, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system.
The parasympathetic.
Yeah, that's your rest and digest mode. It actively lowers the heart rate and pulls her out of survival mode, which brings the prefrontal cortex back online.
So that one sensory shift primes her for a completely different approach to her day.
Exactly.
Because right after that, she visits a bookstore and picks up a book titled The Things You Can See Only When You Slow Down by Heyman Soon.
Such a great book.
Yeah, and the core insight she takes from it is that slowing down allows us to finally notice everyday beauty and, maybe more importantly, to hear our own thoughts clearly.
She realizes she's been rushing through everything.
Treating her English studies as a race to the finish line.
And recognizing that tendency is really the first step toward re-engineering how we input information into our brains.
Well, let's look at the actual mechanics of that re-engineering, because the most radical shift isn't the material she studies, but how she primes her brain before she even looks at a book.
Right.
By Monday, she starts waking up 15 minutes earlier. And instead of grabbing the phone, she makes tea, sits by the window, and writes down 3 specific things she is grateful for.
Simple things.
Yeah, things like, today I have another chance to learn, or I am improving every day.
She's intentionally setting the cognitive tone, shifting from a reactive state, dictated by her inbox, to a proactive, calm state.
And this spills over into her reading habits. Instead of rushing to translate every sentence perfectly in a book of short stories, treating it like a math problem to be solved.
Which is what we all do.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of that, she slows down, she imagines the scenes, smiles at the funny parts, and when she finishes, she doesn't do a word-for-word translation.
Crucial point right there.
She closes the book and explains the story out loud to herself in her own words.
That shift from translation to summarization is a massive evolution in her learning strategy.
I'm going to push back on this strategy, though.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure, go for it.
If you are spending 15 extra minutes in the morning drinking tea, and you are intentionally reading much slower in the evening, you are technically consuming far less information, right?
Technically, yes.
So if old Sophia was exposing herself to 50 new vocabulary words a night, and new Sophia is only exposing herself to 10, how does doing less actually lead to faster improvement?
Because we have to separate data accumulation from actual language acquisition.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, rushing through 10 pages of English and exposing yourself to 50 new words gives you a net gain of 0 if your brain is too stressed to encode them.
Because of the cortisol.
Right. When you read slowly and visualize a story, you move from superficial exposure to deep retention.
Sure, I agree the quality matters, but if I only deeply learn 5 words instead of 50, won't it take me, like, a decade to become fluent? I mean, a language has tens of thousands of words. It feels like the math doesn't work out.
The math doesn't work out if you view the brain as a hard drive, but that isn't how memory works.
It's not.
No. When you rely on rote memorization, like cramming 50 words via flashcards, you are using short-term semantic memory. The brain is incredibly efficient. It regularly prunes data it deems irrelevant.
So it just deletes them.
Exactly. So you memorize 50 words today, and your brain discards 48 of them by tomorrow.
Wow.
But when Sophia reads a story, visualizes it, and forces herself to summarize it using her existing vocabulary. She is using episodic memory. She's creating a rich contextual web.
So the brain views the contextualized words as necessary to keep.
Exactly. Furthermore, word-for-word translation keeps you tethered to your native language. It acts as a crutch.
Well, that makes sense.
By closing the book and generating a summary, she is building new neural pathways that allow her to think directly in the target language. She is practicing actual fluency, the ability to generate original thought.
Right.
So the volume is lower, but the cognitive quality is exponentially higher, which leads to faster, more permanent acquisition.
Okay, the distinction between semantic pruning and episodic memory clarifies a lot. She is essentially proving to her brain that these words actually matter.
Yes.
And she deepens this by integrating her emotions. When she works on vocabulary, she focuses on emotion words like peaceful, patient, relaxed, balanced.
I love this part.
Yeah, but instead of writing definitions, she writes highly personal sentences. Today I feel peaceful. I want a balanced life.
Tying new knowledge to a personal emotional state is just a brilliant tactic.
Why is that so effective?
Well, the amygdala, which processes emotions, is situated right next to the hippocampus.
Oh, the memory center.
Exactly. When information has emotional weight and personal relevance, the brain flags it as vital for survival or identity, which drastically improves retention. These are no longer sterile vocabulary exercises. They become internalized mantras.
And she then takes this out into the physical world.
Yes.
Every afternoon, she implements a 20-minute walk with absolutely no phone. She simply walks, observing the environment, and practices describing her surroundings in English.
Such a great exercise.
The sky is bright today. The trees are moving gently.
She basically turns the world around her into a low-stakes, stress-free classroom.
She also revamps how she consumes audio. Instead of playing a podcast in the background while, washing dishes or something, she listens with full attention.
She's using the Effortless English podcast for this, right?
Right? And she pauses it, summarizes the main ideas out loud, and even records herself speaking. And here is the kicker. She notices her pronunciation is improving naturally, not because she is drilling phonetics, but simply because she is calmer.
Yeah, and there is a very physical reason for that.
Oh, what?
Yeah, tension literally constricts the vocal cords and the muscles in the larynx. Producing unfamiliar phonemes in a new language requires immense muscular flexibility and these precise micro-movements in the mouth and throat.
Oh, I never thought of that.
When you're stressed, your physical ability to produce those new sounds diminishes, so relaxation physically improves your pronunciation.
Okay, let's unpack this. If we look at traditional language learning, we usually approach it like trying to eat a 3-course meal in 30 seconds.
We do.
We just cram it all in. We aren't digesting anything. We're just making ourselves sick. Sophia has completely dismantled the barrier between living and studying. She isn't locking herself in a room with flashcards for 2 hours of misery anymore.
She has stopped viewing English as a mountain she has to aggressively conquer and started viewing it as a lens through which she can peacefully experience her day.
There is a beautiful metaphor in the materials that anchors this entire concept.
A grandmother's garden, right?
Yeah. Yes. Sophia visits her grandmother in the garden and confesses that even with her new habits, her mind still feels restless sometimes.
Which is perfectly normal.
Right. And her grandmother pours them both a cup of warm tea, gently stirs it, and points to the moving water. She says, "You can't clearly see your reflection while the water is moving."
Oh, that's so good.
Like, wait a minute. The tea settles and becomes completely still. Suddenly, the reflection is perfect. Her grandmother tells her, "Our minds are the same. When we slow down, we see things clearly."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it perfectly illustrates how a turbulent mind deflects information. A mind spinning with anxiety and, a million open tabs creates a chaotic surface. It just cannot absorb anything accurately.
A still mind absorbs effortlessly.
Exactly.
And we see the ripple effect of this stillness months later at her English conversation club.
Yeah.
When the teacher asks the group what helps them feel calm, Sophia articulates her entire routine slowly and confidently in English. She talks about the walks, the reading, the tea without her phone.
You might assume that bringing up personal mindfulness in a classroom setting could be, awkward, but it actually completely changes the room's dynamic.
It really does. Her classmates start sharing their own peaceful habits. The atmosphere becomes incredibly warm and encouraging.
It's contagious.
When someone is genuinely calm, it disarms the people around them. Her internal peace is quite literally improving her ability to connect with other people in her second language.
which is the fundamental goal of language learning. It is a tool for human connection.
And the materials highlight the contrast in her journal entries. The old pages were just a catalog of stress, like I'm too busy, I'm stressed, I'm not improving.
Right.
But the newest pages read, today I enjoyed learning. I had a peaceful walk. I spoke English with confidence. Now, the text makes a point to mention that her life did not magically become perfect.
That is a crucial distinction. A calm mind does not eliminate the chaos of life. She still has demanding days at the office. She still makes grammatical errors. The difference is her relationship to that chaos. She has built the cognitive architecture to navigate problems with patience rather than being consumed by them.
So what does this mean for you listening right now? The overarching lesson is that you do not need to abandon your life or find hours of free time to improve your learning capacity.
No, not at all.
A 5-minute walk, a single page of a book, a cup of tea without a screen in your face, or just a few deep breaths, that is enough to still the water in the teacup.
Small, intentional moments of sensory grounding are enough to reset the nervous system.
The materials leave us with a direct challenge, and we are going to pass that challenge straight to you.
Yes, I love this challenge.
Tomorrow morning, for the very first 10 minutes after you wake up, leave your phone alone.
Don't even touch it.
Do not look at it. Open a window. Take 5 slow, deep breaths. Notice 3 specific things you can physically see out that window. Then say 3 simple sentences about your morning out loud in whatever language you were trying to learn.
And if you aren't learning a language, do it in your native language to practice the mindfulness.
Right. Say something like, today feels peaceful, or I am grateful for this new day.
That 10-minute investment changes the entire neurochemical trajectory of your morning.
Yeah.
If we look at the biggest picture here, the ultimate goal of learning any communication skill is to foster understanding with others. But perhaps the true foundational building block of fluency is establishing a clear, quiet connection with yourself.
That is so true.
You simply cannot fluently translate your thoughts to the world if you cannot hear them yourself over the noise of your own life.
You have to clear the static before you can broadcast the signal. We hope you take that 10-minute challenge tomorrow morning. Keep learning and see if you can find just 5 minutes today to sit quietly with no phone, no notifications, and just experience the stillness. Have a peaceful day, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Imagine you have this high-definition IMAX level movie playing in your head.
Oh yeah, like a fully nuanced cinematic masterpiece.
Exactly, complete with a sweeping score, and you are just totally ready to blow everyone's mind with this amazing thought. But when you actually open your mouth to describe it, you realize you only have the vocabulary to draw a stick figure.
It is, well, it's a universally humbling experience, honestly. And it usually happens when the stakes feel incredibly high. Your brain just abruptly severs that connection between your deep internal understanding and your external ability to actually articulate it.
Yeah, and that frustrating disconnect, it isn't just a language problem, it's actually a global crisis problem. So, welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission today is to figure out exactly why our brains freeze when we try to talk about massive, overwhelming issues, specifically climate change. And we're going to explore the exact psychological hack to fix it.
It's a really good one, too.
We are drawing from a few sources today, but it's all anchored by this fascinating case study from the Easy English podcast. It's titled Communicating Climate Change, Emma's English Learning Journey.
And, on the surface, the source material just presents this straightforward narrative about a woman trying to improve her second language.
It's a standard learning story, right?
Right, but when you look at the mechanics of what she actually does, it turns into this absolute masterclass on how simple communication, even deeply imperfect communication, can bypass our collective anxiety and actually create tangible change.
So let's introduce you to the subject of this case study. Her name is Emma. She's a 30-year-old marketing assistant working for a small company.
Just a normal, everyday professional.
Exactly. Outside of work, she loves hiking, being outdoors, and every single evening she sits down for some solitary study time to learn English, because her ultimate career goal is to work with international clients.
So she's putting in that grueling, solitary work.
Oh, totally. I think anyone who has tried to master a new skill can relate to that grind.
She definitely has the motivation.
Yeah.
But as we'll see, motivation alone doesn't prevent the cognitive roadblock we're about to discuss.
Right, because to truly understand the breakthrough Emma eventually engineers for herself, we first have to examine her moment of total failure.
The breaking point.
Yeah. It's a Tuesday evening. Emma is sitting in her weekly English conversation class. The teacher stands up, smiles, and writes this massive loaded question on the whiteboard. What is the biggest environmental challenge facing our world today?
I mean, that is the linguistic equivalent of being thrown into the deep end of the pool with weights on your ankles.
Seriously. So the room goes quiet for a second, but then the other students just start jumping in, and they're rattling off these massive, heavy concepts.
Like what?
Like, one student tackles plastic pollution in the oceans, another starts dissecting deforestation, someone else brings up industrial air pollution. They are pulling out all the high-level jargon. And then the teacher looks directly at Emma and asks for her thoughts. Now, the text makes it very clear that Emma cares deeply about this subject. In her native language, she consumes heavy literature on the climate.
So she has the knowledge.
She has a sophisticated IMAX-level understanding of the crisis.
But the output mechanism just completely jams.
So it completely freezes.
Yeah.
All that complex vocabulary vanishes. And the absolute best she can quietly muster in front of the entire class is, and I quote, "I think climate change is very bad for everyone."
Ouch.
Yeah. She leaves the class feeling deeply defeated. Not for lack of ideas, but just a total lack of tools.
What's fascinating here is the underlying neuroscience of that exact moment.
Okay, let's get into that.
Because it has absolutely nothing to do with Emma's intelligence or even her base level of English retention. It is entirely about the gap between her complex internal thoughts and the external tools she currently has available. When we face a multifaceted existential problem, like global warming, our brains naturally feel this desperate need to match the complexity of the problem with equally complex language.
Yeah, we feel this pressure to sound like, I don't know, atmospheric scientists just to be granted permission to enter the conversation.
Exactly. And when you realize you do not have that scholarly vocabulary at your fingertips, whether you're operating in a second language or even your native tongue, the cognitive load just becomes too heavy.
It's just too much all at once.
Right. So the amygdala, which is the part of your brain that processes fear and threat, it perceives this high-stakes social situation as a literal danger.
Like a physical threat.
Essentially, yes. It hijacks the system, pulling resources away from the prefrontal cortex, which is where you actually formulate language and logical thought.
Wow.
The brain just short-circuits to protect you from the perceived social threat of sounding inadequate.
Think about your own life for a second listening to this. Have you ever felt this exact type of paralysis?
Oh, I'm sure everyone has.
Maybe you're sitting in this high-stakes strategy meeting at work, or you're entering a new field of study, and you just don't quite know the insider acronyms yet.
Yeah, the jargon.
You have a great idea, but because you can't wrap it in the perfect corporate speak, you just sit there in silence. You decide that if you can't say it flawlessly, you just won't say it at all.
Which is such a tragic loss of human capital.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exactly the trap Emma is caught in as she walks home from her conversation class.
But Emma's reaction to this failure is what makes her case study so compelling. Because she couldn't express the overwhelming complexity of the problem, she was forced to radically pivot her strategy.
She had to try something new.
She decides to focus entirely on actionable solutions.
Yeah.
So the following Saturday, she walks into her local library and completely bypasses the grammar and syntax books.
Interesting.
She heads straight to the environment section. She borrows a book called The Future We Choose by Christiana Figueres and Tom Rivett-Carnac.
Oh.
And the source highlights that she's drawn to its hopeful tone. It doesn't paralyze the reader with like doomsday scenarios. It actually outlines practical, tangible actions for individuals and businesses.
So she is intentionally shifting her focus from the paralyzing macro problem to these active micro solutions.
Yes. She also picks up No One is Too Small to Make a Difference by Greta Thunberg. And the core message there really hits Emma hard, that every person matters and small actions aggregate into major shifts.
That's a powerful shift in perspective.
Right, and Emma starts evaluating her own life through this lens. She realizes, wait, I already carry a reusable water bottle. I diligently turn off the lights when I leave a room.
She chooses to walk to the local shops instead of driving.
Exactly. She is already living these positive choices. She just needs to learn how to vocalize them.
She possesses the behavioral foundation. The new task is simply mapping the vocabulary onto her existing reality.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, though, because I'm struggling to see the actual mechanism here.
What do you mean?
Well, Emma just suffered a localized total system failure in class, right? She couldn't string together a basic sentence about the environment.
Right.
And her solution to this is to go to the library and check out dense books on climate change written by global diplomats and activists in her second language. Shouldn't reading Christiana figures require a more cognitive load than answering a basic whiteboard question?
It seems completely counterintuitive, I know. You would totally expect that tackling Greta Thunberg in a foreign language would just trigger another amygdala hijack.
Exactly.
But the practical, action-oriented framing of these specific books actually bypasses the brain's threat response.
Wait, how does reading about a global crisis lower the brain's threat response?
Because it breaks the paralysis of abstraction.
Okay.
Think about it. When a teacher asks you to define the biggest environmental challenge, your brain attempts to scan the entire globe, sort through meteorology, geopolitics, economics, and then translate all of that into English.
Yeah, that's a lot.
The sheer volume of abstract data causes the crash. But Thunberg's message and the specific vocabulary Emma is extracting from it revolves around physical, tangible items. A water bottle, a light switch, a bicycle.
So she is shrinking the abstract terror of the global climate crisis down to the physical dimensions of her own living room.
Precisely. In cognitive psychology, processing tangible nouns and physical actions requires significantly less mental bandwidth than processing abstract concepts.
That makes a lot of sense.
Emma isn't starting from scratch and trying to build a whole philosophy of climate change. She's simply learning the labels for the objects she already holds in her hand.
So intellectually understanding that you need to focus on local solutions is one thing, but there's a physical and neurological bridge you have to build to actually vocalize those solutions under pressure.
Yeah, the application part.
How did Emma train her brain to cross that bridge?
By forcing the abstract vocabulary to become deeply, intensely personal.
Let's talk about how she does that. She picks up a textbook called English Vocabulary in Use. She's looking at standard environmental terms, right? Renewable energy, biodiversity, carbon footprint, sustainability.
The usual suspects.
But she refuses to do the standard exercise of just memorizing the glossary definitions. Instead, she writes sentences that are explicitly autobiographically about her own life.
Oh, I love this.
She writes, I recycle glass and paper. She writes, I want to reduce my carbon footprint by walking to the store.
That is a phenomenal application of what psychologists call the self-reference effect.
The self-reference effect, what is that exactly?
Well, the self-reference effect is a memory phenomenon where people are significantly more likely to remember information if they can somehow relate it to themselves.
Oh, because it's about me, so I care more.
Exactly. The brain naturally prioritizes data that is relevant to our own survival, identity, or daily routine. By tying a foreign concept to her own kitchen, she makes the vocabulary neurologically sticky.
And she takes this a step further into physical action, too.
How so?
She goes on these morning walks and listens to an audio program called Effortless English. But she doesn't just passively listen.
Passive listening is where a lot of people get stuck.
Right, but after every lesson, she hits pause, and she forces herself to speak out loud for 2 straight minutes about an environmental topic.
Just out in public.
Yeah. Why forests matter or how to reduce food waste, just walking down the street talking to herself.
Which is lowering what linguists call the affective filter. When you practice alone, out loud, you are building the physical muscle memory of speaking without the social anxiety of being judged by a classroom.
My absolute favorite part of her strategy, though, is how she hijacks standard language exercises.
Oh, the short stories.
Yes. She reads a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners. These are just basic, everyday fictional stories. But she forces a connection to the environment after every single chapter.
That is so clever.
If the story is about a quiet little village, her verbal summary focuses on how the villagers protect their local nature. If the story is about a family having dinner, she practices a monologue about how those parents should teach their children to recycle their food packaging.
She is essentially gamifying her own learning.
It's the difference between trying to memorize a map of a massive city you have never visited versus drawing a map of your own neighborhood.
Right, because you already know it.
You're attaching the new, unfamiliar information to the exact roads you already walk every single day.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the psychological brilliance of this method is undeniable. By weaving this vocabulary into her daily routines and her physical habits, she completely removes the fear of making a mistake.
Yeah, because she's the expert on her own life.
Exactly. She is no longer trying to recite an academic paper on atmospheric degradation. She is just describing her own life. And nobody, not even her own internal critic, can tell her that she is describing her own life wrong.
You are the undisputed expert on your own daily routine.
And this is really the ultimate hack for learning anything. Whether you're trying to learn a language, master a complex new software program at work, or understand a heavy scientific concept.
Ground it in reality.
Yes. If you can tie the new information directly to your existing reality, to things you already care about and physically interact with, your brain stops treating the information as a foreign threat. It starts treating it as a useful, everyday tool.
So we have Emma building this customized, highly personal toolkit. But eventually, all of this solitary practice, talking to herself on walks, summarizing short stories in her room, it has to collide with the real world. She has to test the system.
The transition from the laboratory to the field.
Right. And the source material highlights 3 escalating wins for Emma that prove how incredibly effective this strategy is, even when the communication itself isn't flawless.
What's the first one?
It starts small, in a city park. Emma is sitting on a bench, reading one of her environmental books. A tourist walks by, notices the cover, and strikes up a conversation. He asks her, "What do you think ordinary people can do to help the environment?"
Which is a beautiful echo of the exact prompt that paralyzed her on the whiteboard.
Well, the very same one. But this time, the amygdala doesn't hijack her brain.
Because she's ready.
She uses her practiced self-referential sentences. She looks at the tourist and says, "We can recycle. We can save water. We can use reusable bags. We can walk or ride bicycles when possible."
Simple, effective.
The tourist smiles and tells her he loves her answer because it is highly, quote, realistic.
That external validation is the proof of concept she needed. She communicated a solution, and it was received perfectly.
So, with that proof of concept, the stakes escalate. Emma joins an English discussion group.
Okay, stepping it up.
The topic of the week is how communities can protect the environment. At first, she notes that the old anxiety starts creeping back in.
That's natural.
But she pushes through, raises her hand, and using her clear, personalized vocabulary, she suggests that local schools should teach recycling, and communities should organize neighborhood cleanups.
And how did they react?
The result. Another student actually goes out of their way to praise her for how clearly she articulated her ideas.
The momentum is building. The physical repetition of the vocabulary has completely overridden the anxiety response.
Which brings us to the final test, where the stakes are strictly professional. At her marketing job, her manager announces a new corporate initiative. The company wants to become more environmentally friendly, and they are asking all employees for ideas.
The big leagues.
The text notes that a few months prior, Emma would have stayed completely quiet and let the moment pass her by. But this time, she volunteers.
What does she suggest?
She suggests using less printer paper. She suggests replacing the disposable cups in the break room with reusable mugs. She suggests implementing policies for turning off computers after work and adding recycling bins to all the offices.
Notice how every single suggestion is a physical, tangible noun or action. Mugs, paper, computers.
And the company loves it. They actually implement her ideas the very next month.
Wow.
Emma writes in her journal about how proud she is, noting the incredible shift from being terrified to speak to sharing ideas that actively move the needle at her company.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at the sociological impact of this story, Emma isn't just passing a language test anymore.
No, not at all.
She literally changed her company's environmental footprint. How did her basic, simple sentences achieve what complex scientific jargon so often fails to do?
Right. So what does this all mean? Why did the reusable mug pitch work when a pitch about corporate carbon mitigation strategies might have failed completely?
Because complex jargon in activism often acts as a gatekeeper.
A gatekeeper.
Yeah. When we use massive, complicated phrasing, we might feel like we sound smart, but we are actively alienating the people listening to us. We make the problem seem so incomprehensibly large that nobody feels qualified to help.
We inflict that same paralysis on them that Emma felt in the classroom. We trigger their cognitive overload.
Exactly that. When you tell a mid-level manager, we need to fundamentally restructure our anthropogenic carbon offsetting paradigms, their brain just shuts down.
They completely zone out.
They zone out because they don't have the tools to engage with that level of abstraction. But when Emma says, let's buy reusable mugs and put a recycling bin by the printer, people immediately respond with, I understand that. I can do that today.
Yeah.
By using simple, accessible English, her ideas had absolutely zero barrier to entry.
The insight here is that simple language isn't a crutch to people who don't know the big words. Simple language is actually the most effective strategic tool for driving corporate and community change.
Perfection is the enemy of action. As the source material points out so beautifully, conversations create awareness, awareness inspires action, and action creates change.
It's a chain reaction.
But that entire chain reaction dies immediately if the very first step, the conversation, is misunderstood or makes the listener feel excluded. Simple language carries incredibly powerful, world-changing messages precisely because it invites everyone to participate.
It strips away the exclusivity. It says, you don't need a PhD to help save the planet. You just need to know how to turn off a light switch and talk to your neighbor about it.
Micro-actions paired with micro-vocabulary. That is how the movement actually grows.
Which brings us to the core lesson of this deep dive. Whether you are actively trying to learn a new language, whether you're trying to advocate for climate action at your job, or if you're just trying to navigate any complex, overwhelming situation in your life, you do not need a master's degree level of vocabulary to make a meaningful contribution.
You really don't.
You do not have to wait until your thoughts are flawlessly structured to start participating in the solution.
The stick figure drawing is infinitely more useful than the IMAX movie that nobody else ever gets to see.
That is so true. The source material actually leaves us with a challenge, and I want to pass it directly on to you listening right now.
Oh, the speaking challenge.
Yeah. Try answering these 2 questions out loud today. Even if you're just sitting alone in your car or walking the dog, what does climate change mean to you? And what small physical actions do you take in your daily life?
Do it in simple sentences.
Use the tangible nouns. Hear yourself speak the answers out loud and feel how much lighter the cognitive load is.
This raises an important question, though.
What's that?
Well, the case study focuses heavily on Emma using simple language to cross national borders, right? Speaking with international clients or tourists. But what if we took this exact same framework and applied it closer to home?
Applied it how? Like in our own neighborhoods?
Think about the intense political and cultural divides we currently face within our own communities, especially when discussing a crisis like climate change.
Oh, it gets so toxic.
We spend so much time shouting past each other, using highly polarized, weaponized jargon to prove who is right and who is wrong.
Yeah, we try to sound like the ultimate authority.
Right. What if we embraced simple, clear, imperfect communication without feeling the need to sound like an unassailable scholarly expert when talking to our own neighbors?
That's a huge shift.
If exclusionary jargon is harming the climate movement by gatekeeping participation, could stripping away the academic posturing actually bridge the divides in our own backyards?
Man, if we stopped trying to win the argument with unapproachable concepts and just started talking about the local parks, the community cleanups, and the reusable mugs.
Exactly.
That is a powerful framework to view our own communities through. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep learning, keep tying new knowledge to your own daily life, and keep speaking up even when you don't have the perfect words.
Remember that every small action matters.
Because sometimes all it takes to start changing the world is having the courage to just draw the stick figure.
Imagine you're walking into the biggest, most pivotal job interview of your entire career.
Oh, high stakes.
Yeah, super high stakes. But you are completely out of breath. Your hair is just wild from running. And you have this massive, highly visible scorch mark burned right onto the sleeve of your jacket.
That is literally the ultimate nightmare scenario.
Right. It's awful. And you'd think, well, is your first impression just ruined? Does the person across the desk instantly write you off as, I don't know, a walking disaster?
You definitely assume so, yeah.
But actually, the source material we are exploring today suggests you might, strangely enough, be in the absolute perfect psychological state to just nail the conversation and get the job.
Which is wild because it completely defies, everything traditional career advice tells us about those crucial first 7 seconds.
Exactly.
I mean, we are taught to perfectly engineer our posture, our wardrobe, our handshake. But life, it rarely allows for that level of sterile control.
It really doesn't. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a truly insightful piece of source material today. It's titled The Art of First Impressions and Morning Disasters.
It's a great read.
It really is. And the mission for you listening today is to explore that paralyzing anxiety we all feel surrounding first impressions. We're going to figure out if our own brains are secretly sabotaging us.
Spoiler alert, they usually are.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And we are going to learn how to navigate those massive high-stakes moments when absolutely everything goes wrong.
And what makes these sources so compelling is that they take this rather dry academic concept of social perception and they just drag it through the mud of a terrible, horrible, very bad morning.
Yeah, you get to see human psychology under immense stress. which is fascinating. But I mean, the source text immediately grabs your attention by acknowledging this brutal truth, right? That
Yeah.
people do form rock-solid opinions about us within seconds.
Oh, for sure. Often before a single word is even spoken.
Right, it comes down to a handshake or, like,
Yeah.
how you were dressed. But I have to push back on this premise right away. Like, is it really fair that we judge each other so quickly based on surface details?
It's a tough pill to swallow.
I mean, what if you are fundamentally a great person, right? A totally competent professional who is just having an agonizing, completely out of character, spectacularly terrible day.
Well, that is an entirely valid, I'd say almost universal fear. The thought of being judged on our absolute worst day is terrifying.
Yeah.
But rather than just, validating that fear, the source material provides this painfully relatable case study of that exact nightmare scenario.
It's so relatable it hurts.
It really does. We are introduced to a protagonist facing a morning where every conceivable variable goes wrong right before the most crucial first impression of their career.
Right. So let's lay out the baseline here. We are talking about the morning of a final round interview for a highly coveted job. And the preparation for this was, it was flawless.
Textbook prep.
Totally. The protagonist rehearsed answers to every possible question. The outfit was perfectly laid out on a chair the night before. But wait, if they laid the outfit out and rehearsed everything, isn't that exactly how you prevent a disaster?
You would think so, yeah.
Like, if you plan meticulously, shouldn't you be immune to this kind of morning?
Well, that level of meticulous planning actually creates a very rigid psychological structure.
Interesting.
Yeah, when you engineer a morning down to the minute, waking up at 6 a.m., showering, ironing a slate crease out of the blazer, reviewing notes over coffee, and leaving at exactly 7:30 a.m., you are essentially removing all your shock absorbers.
Oh, I see.
You are setting up a system that is incredibly fragile. So when one thing goes wrong, the brain doesn't just adapt, it registers this catastrophic loss of control.
And the domino effect of disaster here, it's just staggering. So, disaster number one, the water heater.
Oh, no.
On this morning, of all mornings, it just groans, sputters, and completely dies.
Of course it does.
So the result is the protagonist enduring the fastest, coldest shower of their life. They are standing there under this freezing trickle, just trying to tell themselves it's character building.
Which is just a desperate, on-the-fly rationalization.
Total.
Because the brain is suddenly flooded with cortisol, the plan has broken, comfort is gone, and the body is literally in a state of physical shock from the cold water.
Right, and then we hit disaster number two, which is the blazer.
The famous scorch mark.
Yes. They go to iron out this tiny crease from the jacket they laid out the night before. But because they are now rushing, because the adrenaline and panic are just building from that freezing shower, they leave the iron on the fabric a fraction too long.
Just a second too long.
And they scorch the sleeve, a highly visible burn mark right on the arm. So they have to ditch the perfect outfit and swap it for a backup, significantly less impressive jacket.
And, the physical damage to the jacket is unfortunate, but the psychological damage is so much heavier.
Right.
Because that scorch mark becomes a beacon for all their mounting anxiety. The cognitive load of the morning has suddenly doubled because now they are not just thinking about interview questions, they are fixated on their wardrobe failure.
It reminds me of another fantastic anecdote from the source material regarding this DIY room painting disaster.
Oh, the skirting board story.
Yeah, so someone decides to paint a spare room to save a bit of money, but they fail to tape off the skirting boards properly. So they end up with this faint blue line running along the bottom of a wall that is supposed to be pristine white.
And you just can't unsee it.
Exactly. They get hyperfixated on that one mistake, so they rush the rest of the job, they run out of paint halfway through the second coat, and then for the grand finale, they knock an entire full tray of paint off a ladder straight onto the carpet.
Which is just a textbook cascading failure.
Yeah, whether you are prepping for an interview or painting a spare room, our initial mistakes tend to snowball. Like panic breeds clumsiness.
It really does.
You scorch the blazer because you were rushing from the cold shower. You knock the paint over because your brain is completely overloaded by the frustration of that blue line.
And physical disasters like spilled paint, broken heaters, ruined clothes. Those are tangible problems we can see. But how does the human mind cope when the external world seemingly turns against you in a way you just can't control?
Right.
How do we function when the environment itself feels actively hostile to our goals?
And the universe was definitely feeling hostile that morning because we were only halfway through the nightmare. Now we enter the commute from hell.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Our protagonist leaves the flat already running behind schedule, wearing the backup jacket, and they arrive at the bus stop just in time to watch their usual bus completely sail past.
It doesn't even slow down, right?
Doesn't even slow down. It's totally packed full.
So now they are entirely at the mercy of public transit, which is a massive trigger for feeling out of control.
Totally.
The rigid schedule from the night before has entirely collapsed.
So they're standing there, anxiously checking their watch every 30 seconds, which, as the source points out, is a completely bizarre human stick.
We all do it, though.
We all do it.
Yeah.
Even though staring at a watch possesses absolutely zero magical power to make the next bus appear faster.
None at all.
So finally, a second bus arrives. But it doesn't just drive to the destination, it crawls. It hits every single red light. It stops at every conceivable junction.
And this is where a fascinating psychological turning point happens. The text describes a very specific reaction to this compounding stress.
Yeah.
Instead of having a total breakdown on the bus, the protagonist enters a state the text calls detached calm.
Detached calm. Like, how does that even happen? How do you go from a pounding heart and checking your watch every 30 seconds to a state of calm while sitting in gridlock traffic?
It actually comes down to biology and cognitive fatigue.
Okay.
The human brain simply cannot sustain a state of high alert panic indefinitely. Pumping out adrenaline is metabolically expensive.
That makes sense.
So after the cold shower, the ruined jacket, and the missed bus, the brain's panic reserves are essentially depleted.
Wow.
So the protagonist literally just grits their teeth and accepts that the morning is cursed. They transition from fighting the reality of the situation to simply watching it unfold. It is a profound shift from active panic to a kind of stress-induced acceptance.
Like your brain just short circuits from the overload and decides, fine, burn the blazer, stop the bus. Let's just see how bad this can actually get.
Exactly. And the sources connect this to another great observational story. One of the authors talks about going on a hike with friends. The weather suddenly turns and they get absolutely drenched in a downpour on the way back down the mountain.
Which is a completely miserable experience in the moment.
Entirely miserable. But as they point out, once you are soaked to the bone, a strange, counterintuitive satisfaction sets in.
Really?
Yeah, because you are already completely wet, you stop worrying about stepping in puddles, you stop trying to dodge the raindrops, you just accept the reality of being wet.
Right, what's a little more water at that point?
Exactly. And suddenly, the friction of fighting the environment is gone. Plus, it makes getting home to dry clothes and a hot drink incredibly satisfying. It is about finding the silver lining in the total loss of control.
So, if you are listening right now, try to put yourself in that exact state of stress-induced acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
You survived the freezing shower, you are wearing the backup jacket, you survived the crawling bus. You finally walk through the doors of the office with wild, wind-blown hair completely off your perfectly engineered schedule.
Just a mess.
Just a mess. How do you even begin to project confidence? Like, how do you mask the fact that you feel like a walking disaster?
Well, the answer involves a massive psychological revelation about how other people actually perceive us, paired with a bit of cosmic irony.
So let's look at the climax of this disastrous morning. The protagonist arrives at the office with exactly 2 minutes to spare.
Cutting it so close. So close. They're totally flustered, but doing their absolute best to fake some level of professional composure. They walk up to the receptionist, announce they are here for the interview, and the receptionist tells them to take a seat. Why? Because the interviewer is also running late.
The ultimate plot twist.
I know. All that panic, all that rushing, the scorched blazer, the agonizing bus ride, and they were keeping the exact same time as the person interviewing them.
The universe grants a tiny moment of grace.
Yeah.
But the psychological impact of that realization is what truly changes the outcome of the day.
It totally changed the game for them. Because the interview itself ended up going incredibly well.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, the protagonist was calm, answered questions clearly, and even made the interviewers laugh. Why? Because after surviving the broken water heater and the bus ride, the actual interview questions felt incredibly easy by comparison.
The baseline of stress had been completely reset.
Exactly. If you can survive the morning from hell, you can easily talk about your 5-year plan. And 3 days later, they got the email offering them the job. See, we started this deep dive terrified that a bad morning would ruin a first impression. But it didn't.
No.
The windblown hair and the backup jacket didn't disqualify them, which brings us to a core academic concept highlighted in our source material. It is a powerful cognitive bias known as the spotlight effect.
Because the protagonist was absolutely terrified that their messy hair or their less impressive jacket would act as this giant flashing neon sign broadcasting their failure.
And the spotlight effect explains why we feel that way. It proves that we massively, consistently overestimate how much other people notice our small imperfections.
Right.
We assume we are the center of everyone else's attention because fundamentally we are trapped in an egocentric perspective. You experience every single one of your own stumbles, so your brain naturally assumes everyone else is logging those stumbles too.
It's like assuming everyone else is watching a movie where you are the main character, when in reality they're all the main characters in their own movies, and you are just a blurry background extra in a coffee shop scene.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Everyone else is too preoccupied with their own worries, their own insecurities, and their own complicated mornings to scrutinize your details.
Yeah.
The interviewer, who was running late, wasn't looking at the candidate's backup jacket. They were entirely consumed by their own internal monologue about why their own schedule was falling apart.
And there is a fantastic piece of supporting evidence for this in the sources. It details a story about showing up to a coffee meeting.
Oh, I loved this part.
Yeah, so the person was told it was a casual meeting, so they dressed down. But when they arrived, it turned out to be a much more formal event. The other person was in a full suit.
Oh, that's the worst feeling.
It's awful. Our storyteller sat there feeling hopelessly, agonizingly underdressed the entire time. The internal spotlight was just burning hot. They thought the entire conversation was tainted by their wardrobe mistake.
But what was the actual external reality?
The other person barely noticed. They didn't even mention it. They ended up having a fantastic, really productive conversation. The source makes such a vital point here. The friction between our internal monologue, which is screaming, "This is a disaster, everyone is judging me," and the external reality is massive.
Huge.
The story we tell ourselves in the moment is almost always far more dramatic than the truth.
People are inherently much more forgiving of our visual and situational flaws than we give them credit for. It is a profoundly liberating realization once you internalize it.
So if the spotlight effect proves that people aren't hyper-fixating on our physical flaws, how do we apply this grace to how we act and speak?
That's the real question.
Like, how does someone use this to their advantage when they're under intense pressure, specifically when communicating? Because the source material pivots to a highly relevant question raised by a listener of their original show. They ask, how can someone sound more confident in high-stakes situations like interviews, specifically when communicating in a second language, like English?
And communicating in a second language during an interview is the perfect arena to test the spotlight effect.
For sure.
Because every single word feels high stakes. Every slight grammatical error feels like a scorch mark on your blazer. The cognitive load is immense because you are trying to manage your professional persona while simultaneously translating vocabulary in real time.
Right. So what does the source material advise for someone trapped under that specific spotlight?
The text outlines 3 very actionable pieces of advice, and they're all rooted in overcoming this cognitive bias.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, don't fake it. Don't try to sound like a native speaker if you aren't one. Don't put on an act or try to use overly complex corporate jargon just to sound impressive.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Because trying to fake native fluency just generates more cognitive load, right?
Exactly.
It is like trying to execute a flawless, complex dance routine when you haven't fully learned the basic steps. It leads directly to that cascading failure we saw with the DIY painting.
Right. Your goal shouldn't be perfection. Your goal should be to present a clear, thoughtful version of yourself.
Okay, love that.
The second piece of advice tackles the hardest part of being nervous. Slow down.
Oh, that's hard to do.
It is. When we are anxious, our internal metronome speeds up. We view silence as a void that exposes our lack of knowledge. We rush to fill every single second because silence feels like failure.
This is where time perception gets really interesting. Because of the adrenaline, taking a 3-second pause feels like an absolute eternity to the speaker.
It feels like an hour.
It really does. You feel like the entire room is staring at you, just waiting for you to crash. But to the listener across the table, those 3 seconds don't read as panic.
Not at all.
A short pause makes you look considered. It makes you look like a thoughtful person who is carefully constructing a meaningful answer. The internal time feels agonizing. But the external time just sounds like confident pacing.
Spot on. And the third piece of advice is to give yourself permission to rephrase.
Give yourself permission.
Okay. Yeah, if you stumble over a sentence or if the first attempt doesn't come out right, just stop, take a breath, and rephrase it.
Right.
Native speakers do this constantly in everyday conversation. We start a sentence, lose our train of thought, and just start over. We just don't notice it when we do it ourselves.
Right. We only notice it when we feel the spotlight on us.
Yeah.
We think the interviewer is sitting there with a red pen, grading our vocabulary and deducting points for every pause or grammatical slip.
But they aren't. The listener sitting across from you is just waiting for the core message. They are trying to understand your idea.
Yeah.
They are not scrutinizing the mechanics of your sentence structure. They just want to connect with you as a human being. The spotlight isn't on your grammar, it is on your meaning.
That is incredibly freeing because whether it is a scorch mark on a backup jacket or a stumbled sentence in an interview, the person across the table is largely oblivious to the internal disaster you're experiencing.
They really are.
They're just happy you showed up, and they're hoping to have a good conversation.
And the overarching theme of all these sources is that human connection is fundamentally resilient. It can survive a cold shower, a late bus, and a less than perfect vocabulary.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up today's deep dive, what are the main takeaways for you, the listener? Well, first impressions do matter. Of course they do.
Definitely.
But they matter far, far less than our anxious, panicked brains tell us in the moment. The people sitting across the table from you, whether it is a final round job interview, a formal coffee meeting, or just a new acquaintance, are usually much more forgiving and self-absorbed than you expect them to be.
And I strongly encourage you to carry this knowledge with you the next time a well-laid plan completely falls apart, because it will.
But it definitely will.
The water heater will break, the bus will drive past without stopping. When you feel flustered, when you feel that panic rising and the cognitive overload setting in, remember the spotlight effect?
Yes.
Let go of the scorched blazer. Accept the stress of the moment. Allow for that detached calm and just focus on the conversation in front of you.
Let go of the illusion of total control and just be present.
Beautifully said.
But before we go, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Okay, let's hear it.
So we've spent this entire time talking about how to survive the spotlight and manage our own anxiety. But let's flip the concept entirely.
I like where this is going.
If the spotlight effect means that almost everyone in the world is walking around totally preoccupied with their own internal worries, their own insecurities, and their own messy hair, well, imagine how much power and influence you could wield if you were the one person in the room who turned your spotlight entirely outward.
Oh, wow.
Right. What if you took all that frantic energy you spend worrying about how you look or how you sound and used it to give the other person your absolute undivided attention? How would that change the very nature of the first impression you make?
That is a phenomenal question to ponder. Because true charisma is often just the rare ability to make someone else feel like they are the only person in the room.
It is something to think about the next time you are standing in the rain, waiting for a late bus. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We really appreciate you spending your time with us, and we promise to be back with more surprising insights next time.
Keep questioning those assumptions, and we will see you on the next deep dive.